Welcome back to Black Stories, where we go beyond the pages of textbooks and into the hearts and voices of those who lived the history. Too often, we think we know the black history in America because we've read it. But what we've read has been selected, has been censored, and sanitized to fit the shelf, not always to tell the truth. But what if you could hear the truth firsthand?
Dr. G. Real stories, real people, unpacking the struggles, reclaiming the narratives with Dr. G.
Today I have the deep honor of sitting with Elder Jim Embry, a civil rights icon, an environmental justice warrior, an educator, and a living library of black struggles, resistance, and resilience. From marching at just 14 years old to attending Dr. King's funeral and also participating as a funeral marshal in 1968, to redefining sustainability through the lens of justice and food sovereignty, Elder Embry has lived the very history that many of us only read about. Fast forward to today, I want to ask you, you mentioned how your grandfather would say, we paid the same amount of dollar. Let me call it dollar to that. I can't call it the ancient name that you called it.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
we paid the same amount of dollar.
Right.
So there's no way I'm giving my seat up for some white lady
Yes.
and step off the bus. But
Yeah.
that was a huge sense of resilience.
Oh man. Yeah.
However, they'll get pulled out of the bus anyway and left to do the rest of the journey on foot. How do you see that happening today in today's society? How do you see our black brothers and sisters being told to give up their seats, being told to get off the bus and give it up or do the rest of the journey on foot? And how should our reaction be to that?
I think the primary reason why my great grandfather, we called him for short, he was named after an army general. His full name was Don Carlos Buell Ballou, and Don Carlos Buell was a white general in the Civil War. And when my great grandfather was born, General Buell, little background, General Buell was a Union Army general who came into Kentucky, and he wisely came in and he did not confiscate the properties of the farms, plantations that had enslaved Africans, as was done for the South, which meant you could keep your horses, you could keep your mules, and you could keep your people in enslaved condition. People that owned my family thought, wow, what a kind general. During this war, he didn't take any of our property. So the next baby that is born on the farm, we're going to honor that general by naming that child after General Don Carlos Buell. We think that's how our great granddad got that name. It's a side note. But as my mom tells the story, that her grandfather's mother would tell him repeatedly that your father fought in the Civil War. And he died in the Civil War. He died for his freedom. He died for our freedom. And they had 7 kids. They died for our freedom. He died for the freedom of those on this farm, those in Kentucky. And she would tell him, because of your father's courage, giving his life up, I'm encouraging you and all the other kids, as best we can, let's never ever again work for white people. First of all, they said that. Then they also said, let's work together as family. Let's work together. And they ultimately all the kids wound up buying property and becoming small farmers. Why? Not because of their dad, he wasn't around, but because of their mother. Their mother, who by all measures would be regarded as illiterate. By all measures, she couldn't read, she couldn't write, she signed with an X. She was illiterate by that standard of measurement. But apparently, she was far more than that. And because of her, I'm sitting here today. They not only survived, but they thrived. Okay, where I live now on a farm is because of her children buying property, beginning a church, beginning a school. So the point is that great grandfather had examples in his life of courage, of bravery, of resilience, of resistance. He had examples of how you stand on principle, of how you just don't be swayed by how the wind blows. And that, he says, I'm sure he thought, each time on the bus, he thought, well, I'm just asked to get off the bus and walk a few miles. But my father and people like him gave up their lives. And I can't give up a seat and walk. I think those kinds of family legacies that we need today. We need those kind of examples in our lives. That's why it's so important to understand history, to read, to write about, to lift up, because it gives us a culture of being today. And when we fragment community, when we fragment and take away schools and take away, those institutions, take away businesses, and we have businesses that are burned down, we lose farms, then we lose a sense of ourself and our responsibility today. So yeah, all around us today, we're being tempted to not live based upon principles, not live based upon values of yourself, your family, your community, values of peace. Okay, we're being taught in all kind of measures around food. We get bombarded with all kind of images of junk food, processed food, all these happy meals and all kinds of great attempts to get us to eat stuff that is designed to make us ill, to give us diseases, make us, have cancers and obesity and all kind of problems. And we just fall into it. And we're saying, let's be critical of those folk that are putting out in our community all those images of what good health looks like. And we know, and we should know better. Okay? Part of our work is to literally to go back and lift up what we call these traditional African culinary and foodways, okay, which meant a lot of biodiversity, a lot of vegetables, a lot of food that you're growing locally on your farm. You're eating it locally. You know your farmers. You know the people. You're saving seeds and you're honoring the earth. African dances are typically low to the ground because you're on the ground and you're honoring the earth. You're honoring the harvest. Reclaiming dance form, reclaiming rituals is part of the work. So yes, absolutely, we're every day in our choices of not only questions of food, choices of how we vote, choices of how we live our lives and the work we perform, and how we either lift up stories of our ancestors, of our people. Our choices every day, like our great granddad had a choice every Saturday. Will you stand on principle? Will you stand on the principle of resistance? Will you stand on standing strong, standing tall, standing truthfully, standing in the sense of righteousness? or will you fall prey to what else they might be offering? So every day we have those choices in mind, and we're saying, let's say, for example, a question of gun violence. Okay, we're saying to largely young men or men, because there's a whole overlay of patriarchy, where we as men have learned that we've been taught and learned that how you express your being masculine, how you express your being a man, a manhood, fatherhood, unclehood, whatever, means you have the right to exact violence on whomever. Exact violence on each other, exact violence on women, exact violence on the natural order. And we have to, as men, we have to critique that and say, well, here's a point of resistance. We're saying that is not the highest aspect of our manhood, is to act violent. I believe that within sports arena, with the sports, that so we got to change how men treat men. If men regard women as being secondary, as lower than men, but men are allowed to treat other men and violently, in sports in particular, men can be on television, they can be fighting. I say if you're on television, you're being paid $30 million a year, and you're fighting, arrest their assets and lock them up. If we're out on the street and we get into a fight on the street, please come and lock us up. Well, why in the hell do we let professional athletes, they're making $30 million a year or more, and why you want to fight anyway? If you fight, call the police and lock them up. And we're telling men, oftentimes in fraternities, men that go through fraternities and they abuse people and they kill people, we're saying we have to address the question of violence of men towards men, even while we're addressing violence of men towards women, men towards children, men towards nature, and things of that nature. So we have to have these points of principle that we can say no to. No, even though you folks who are making the guns, you all come in and you bring in what happened years ago in the 70s and 60s in response to the Black Panther Party, and they were coming in saying, men that stand up in our communities, let's feed children breakfast, let's provide medical services, let's serve the people. Let's take you men who are in gangs and who are harming each other. You come in, you get transformed, and you become an agent of change in your community. And the powers that be, the government, the FBI, the CIA, the corporation said, now we can't have the Black Panther Party arming men with political books. We can't have Black Panther Party arming men with the courage to serve the people and build up black community. We can't have any of that. What we're going to do is we're going to bring in the drugs and the guns, okay, and have wars and gangs being reinstituted, and they'll be killing each other. But we're bringing in the drugs. Again, in the black community, there are no factories making drugs. There are no factories making guns. That's all being imposed upon us. So part of our work is to resist this bombardment of all manner of things that do harm to our community, whether it's food, whether it's drugs, whether it's guns, okay, whether it's, how we deal with highway construction, how we deal with cars, how we deal with all the arts, television. There's a need for a cultural revolution, a cultural transformation. This 500 years of this global European hegemony, this global European domination, this global European being predators on the earth, on people, has to be changed, has to be shifted. A different way of thinking. Okay, so we're trying now to create a different way of thinking about the world and how we view the world, a different way of thinking of how we interact as a human species, a different kind of worldview of how humans then interact with the non-human world. The European construct says those are the other. Those animals, that water, Mississippi River here, those trees, they're part of the non-human world, and we have no obligation to them. They're not related to us, even though the soil, the dirt, the trees make us who we are. So in many ways, our that kind of way of thinking, again, goes back, if you will, some of the traditional cosmologies present on the African continent, present in the Americas continent, present in Asia. It's reclaiming those kinds of indigenous cultural ways where we had a sense of high regard, sacred regard, what we call the non-human and what we call nature and environment. So we got to begin to tell young men, young women, even in gardens, that your responsibility is to be an agent of change. Your responsibility is to help us mature as a species.
Now, you have spoken of peace not just as the absence of violence in many of your discussions, but as a way of life. Why is it very important for us to promote community peace? And how do you think we should go about that?
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to begin putting it into a larger context. Is that we're sitting here in this Victoria neighborhood community garden, and there are raised beds, and there are plants, and there are trees, and houses, and whatever. And so these trees, what's called flowering plants and trees, have been on the earth about 200 million years. Earth's been around about 4.5 billion years. What we call flowering plants and trees have been around about 200 million years. So these trees here, these plants, they know who they are. They know what their role is. The trees don't suck in all the carbon dioxide for themselves and gorge upon that and get fat and fall down. They take just the right amount for them to grow and survive for the last 200 million years. They know who they are. They matured as a species. And they're peaceful. These trees, these plants, they live in peace. They live in harmony. They live in a synergy, a sense of collaboration, cooperation. It's how the earth operates naturally. We came along as humans around 2 or 3 million years ago, according to anthropologists and geographers and whatever, arose, people think and say, out of Africa, as how that human species began to evolve, some 2 or 3 million years ago. So in some ways, humans are the newest species on the earth. So we're young, we're immature when we think about how old trees are, how old mountains are and rivers are. So the question then of peace and violence, I look at it in a larger context, that humans have this legacy, the last 500 years, even thousands of years, of this addiction to violence. With the rise of the nation states, the rise of sedentary cities and empires, we thought that to preserve those empires, you need to have armies, okay, where largely men fought, and you kill each other over the questions of land and empire and trading, whatever else. In my view, that's a sign of our immaturity as a species. I recall being in, it's a sign of our immaturity as a species. So it's beyond just the question of whether we have access to violent means of interaction, whether we have guns or don't have guns, What do we have cars? I mean, we kill more people, you know, in cars. Okay? But so we have to, I think, in my view, we have to look at it in a larger cultural context. Okay, that we need a sense of maturation, and it might take 100, 200, 500 years for us as a species to say enough is enough with how we are addicted to violence. One of the stories that we tell, that back in around 1950, they had this armed struggle in Costa Rica, where the army led a resistance movement to overthrow the U.S. Hegemony, the Spanish government hegemony, and they won that Revolutionary War around 1950. Then the general who became president, his first act was to get rid of the military. He disbanded the military in Costa Rica way back in the 1950s. And we think, wow, that's a great sign that some country's leader, some president recognized that humans have a higher sense of calling. Humans have, to fulfill our fullest humanity, we have to find ways to get rid of our addiction, our use of violence. And the main arm of that is the military. Okay? We talk about community violence and community peace, and we can't necessarily have community peace until we have global peace. When Dr. King died, before he died, he warned us against racism, materialism, and militarism. We've forgotten about that when we have the King Day celebration. We don't talk about his critique of those three elements: militarism, racism, and materialism. So, in my view, they go hand in hand. It's going to be difficult to create community violence as long as we have in our movies, in our television shows, this portrayal of so much violence. We've got to stop having the best-selling movies about James Bond or whoever it might be, and their primary message is about violence. We have to find ways, like in Costa Rica, to disband the military. Every day we go out as a government and we're killing people and we are wreaking havoc. We say in Africa, those countries are free. They're independent. But they're controlled by the U.S. military, they're controlled by U.S. corporations. So we've got to find ways. These things are all interconnected. There are all kinds of symbolism. We have a sports event. It's in the national anthem. This is about war. They bring in the flags and soldiers. It's about war. It's about violence. So we have to begin to critique the whole fabric of violence, not only what we call community violence. So community programs that we have, like we'll have on the Community Peace Celebration, we have to begin talking about all the various cultural elements that promote violence and how we as a community then can work to distance ourselves from those forms of violence, whether it's how we relate to all these violent shows, how we relate to video games, how we relate to guns, how we speak to each other, how we interact, how we design schools. So we need probably peace gardens on every corner. We need a place of, like here, with trees and plants, a place of serenity, of quietness, of conversation. So those are things that, in that sense, we also have to create, as we had years ago in the black community, this great familiarity with our neighbors. When I grew up, we knew all of our neighbors for a mile that way, a mile this, a mile in every direction. We have communities now, people don't know each other, don't interact, don't know each other, don't trust each other. So we have to kind of recreate these neighborhood fabrics, these neighborhood, right now, because everybody kind of has whatever they might need individually. We don't need each other, so we don't interact like we did years ago. We don't barter, we don't visit, we don't take care of our elders. So we have to have this introspection in our community where we say we're going to form these neighborhood councils. We're going to have meetings within all of our neighborhoods. We're going to have people who go out and say your job is to help the elders. We're going to visit them every day. What do you need? You need to have someone help you. If you're in a wheelchair, go to the store, help put a garden in. We have to have a very deep infrastructure within community where we know each other. We're having meals together, for example. We're shopping together. We're trying to build relationships where we work together and we network together to build trust, to build self-reliance, to build resilience. And by doing that, we can then be better able to manifest peace. But we have to know each other. We have to work together. We've got to create spaces that existed years ago in the black community. We had all these interwoven, the schools were interwoven with the churches, that were interwoven with the businesses, that were interwoven with the fraternities and sororities, that were interwoven with the different women's organizations and men's organizations. It was a very tight-knit, like a spider web almost. It's how it looked, like a spider web. So I think peace is based upon how well we build community collaboration, community co-op. We want to have co-ops, okay, throughout our communities. They don't require them being real big. It can be small cooperative enterprises and beyond just co-ops for food. But we have to take care of our elders in particular, okay? We have to give young people a sense that don't see your life as a young man or a young woman, but a young man as preying on your community, as being a predator of your community, but you want to be someone who's a protector of your community. And gardens are a wonderful space to help create this intergenerational dialogue, intergenerational working together. And like the garden we're sitting in here now, there ought to be gardens like this, okay, built throughout the Twin Cities, throughout the neighborhoods, as a place where you come, you feed yourself the best of food, you feed yourself the best of helping people, serving people, and critiquing. We should be coming in here in the neighborhoods having book discussions, film discussions, where we're collectively analyzing, critiquing these cultural elements that want to disrupt peace. When I was growing up again, civil rights movement, we were always having those kinds of meetings and discussions, and we were critiquing the larger matrix that we live in. So peace means a common understanding of history. Peace means a common understanding or common effort of the vision that we're trying to create. Peace means a common critique of all the elements that are around us that try to disrupt peace. We're told when we get a car, you have the right to drive fast. We have speed limits, listed in our neighborhoods. We're told, especially men are told, you have the right to get in your car and drive fast, drive recklessly when it's raining, drive recklessly when it's snowing, and you have accidents, you kill people. Again, we kill more people on the highways because we have a mentality, a cultural pathos that says you can use your car as a weapon, okay? In Japan, if you are caught the first time drinking and driving, you lose your license forever. Over here, you get 3 chances to lose your license. It promotes the question of violence within our cars and in our transportation. So we got a whole cultural critique, a cultural shift to help create peace. It's not, these are not easy questions. They're not simple. They're not quick answers. Okay, and we have to be willing to be invested for the long haul. We have to be willing to work together for the long haul, and begin again to transform our communities that right now are oftentimes just fragmented households of people that by and large don't know each other, don't work together. We've got to create more, small businesses. We ought to have, like in most black communities, years past before desegregation, there were just hundreds and thousands of black-owned small businesses providing service for our communities. And now we have, speaking about the idea of being put off the bus and staying on principle, we've allowed all kinds of people to come into our communities and create businesses, to own businesses, and that's fine at one level that don't look like us. Just fine at one level. We should make damn sure that our people, operate the gas stations, operate small businesses, the food eateries, and whatever else. So we have to democratize the economy, which means we have to create more small-scale businesses that doesn't then allow the large corporations to control everything. We ought to create, we're sitting here with cell phones and other kinds of vehicles. We ought to begin thinking about a vision of how we can create technology in local communities and not just rely on the big corporations that are shipping in cell phones from China. No disregard for the Chinese people at all, but we have to democratize a lot of our commerce and reestablish it in local, regional areas in our communities as a way. The more we take charge of our lives, become more self-reliant, more resilient, in my view, the better we're able to create peace. As long as we have other elements providing so much of what we need, okay, we can't create the peace that we need with so much of our seeds, technology, controlled by other folk. Maybe it means within the Rondo community, for example, we have a vision of moving away from fossil fuels as a way to heat homes. You want more geothermal. You want more solar. You want more wind that can be localized. You can create within your own property, within your community. Maybe we need community power stations that are producing solar power. And that way we can move ourselves away from the corporate domination of much of our lives. So peace has to do with how well we can disrupt, how well we can dismantle, how well we can create these small-scale businesses that aren't only about profit, but they are about community. A business can be about community. It can be about peace. It can be about harmony. It can be about providing what communities need, healthy options, healthy business relationships. And those oftentimes cannot be done with the large corporate-minded businesses. So peace is about claiming responsibility for creating commerce that is just, fair, sustainable, and peaceful.
Dr. G, real stories.